What's going on, beautiful people of YouTube? This is Renebean and welcome to the Game Room. So last year with the huge success of the NES Classic Edition, and this year coming up with the SNES Classic Edition, bound to be a huge success, At Games decided to release yet another Sega Genesis console. This time it has 85 games built into it with the cartridge slot so you can play games that are not on it. Apparently some early adapters of the unit who got their hands on it first, they're not happy with it. They're saying to avoid this thing at all costs. How can that be with something so simple? Sit back and relax. Let's find out. So At Games decided to release this brand new, beautiful Sega Genesis console. It's modeled after the Sega Genesis Model 1, which is very gorgeous. It's going to be mini, just like the SNES Classic. Keep in mind, whenever you have something extremely successful like the NES Classic or the upcoming SNES Classic, people are going to want to piggyback off that success, which is understandable. You want to cash in on that money train when you can. So At Games decided, you know what, we need to make another one. Keep in mind, they did make one previous. I think you can still buy it. It's $49.99. It has a cartridge slot and a couple wireless controllers, but it wasn't as successful whenever the NES Classic Edition came out. You can still find them on shelves whenever that thing was. People kind of bought it when they realized they weren't going to get an NES Classic. But they decided to release this new unit. It's going to be $79.99, coming out around September 22nd down the road. Some early adapters of it who got their hands on this first, they said they're not happy with this thing. They say it plays like junk. So they're trying to outdo the SNES Classic Edition. They're going to offer 85 games built into this unit, which I think is absolutely impressive. It's going to have 28 unofficial games, 45 official games, and then 12 games from systems like the Game Gear and the Sega Master System, which I think is absolutely incredible. It's going to have such hits like Decap Attack, all your Sonics, of course, Phantasy Star. It's going to have some pretty heavy hitter titles on there, which I think is absolutely amazing. Not to mention, all these games are going to be playable in 720p on your big, beautiful flat screen TV, which is obviously the selling point because a lot of people nowadays don't have a CRT TV or older TV that even has component cables. And I think Sega Genesis games look absolutely amazing when they are upscaled. I play it on my Retron 5 and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. If you pop in Sonic, you'll just be like, damn, those colors pop, and they pop great. So what's so bad about this unit? Why are they saying not to buy this thing early on? Apparently they had a lot of issues with it. Some I'm going to leave out just because I think they're nitpicking, but some I can definitely agree with. Apparently the wireless controllers that it comes with, they run on AAA batteries, which isn't bad by itself, but apparently they can't be recharged. There's no port on the controllers to where you can have them plugged in while you're playing or put rechargeables in there, which a lot of modern controllers do. Now obviously the NES Classic Edition one-up that. They had very nice wireless controllers. Even though there was some latency involved, they were still nice. One of the other issues with the controllers is apparently they were very unresponsive when it came to things like the menu. So if you press down, you typically had to press it twice. Some of the games were just not responsive. So it's good if you're playing a very slow-based game such as Phantasy Star, but if you're playing something quick like Sonic, prepare to be met by a lot of frustration. So one of the good things is you can use a wired controller. You will experience no issues. There's no latency. It works exactly as it should, which any of these clone consoles should always have this feature where you can use the original controller. That's one of the reasons I love my Retron 5 so much, is I can use any controller I want for those systems, which is nice. I can play a Sega Genesis game with my Super Nintendo controller if I wanted to. I can reprogram all the buttons, which I think is very nice. It's one of the things they failed to mention about this system, so that would be nice if you could reprogram the buttons for the Sega Genesis controller, because I know some games they love to put that jump button in the wrong place, or at least to me. If you grew up on Super Nintendo, you'll know what I'm talking about. One of the other things that they talked about, which can be a pretty big deal, is frame rate issues. Apparently they have this auto frame rate cycle to where they try to hide this, to where they have such bad frame rate on the system, it can get choppy at times. And apparently even if you put a cartridge-based game in there, you're still going to have issues, which is not a good thing. These are older games. It shouldn't take that much for them to run. Any games on my Retron 5, they run beautifully. The NES Classic Edition doesn't suffer much from frame rate issues. It does have latency issues, but frame rate doesn't appear to be a problem, so that could be a pretty big deal if they don't get it fixed later on. One of the things that they're bitching about that I think is a little bit more nitpicky than anything is a bad power-up cycle, meaning that the console needs to be off when you put the cartridge in to turn it on for it to load, and if the cartridge doesn't load, the game could be dirty. You got to turn the console off, clean it, put it back in while it's off, and turn it on. If that reminds you of anything, it should remind you of a basic console. A Super Nintendo, an NES, Sega Genesis, it doesn't matter. They were all like that. They all recommend that the console be off before inserting the game. If anything, it might give you a more nostalgic feel to have to pull the game out, blow it, put it back in for it to work. So that's all on their list I feel we needed to talk about. Everything else they mentioned does seem more nitpicky than anything. They talked about how the menu was terrible when they started up, but I think that's more personal biased opinion. Some people love the PlayStation 4 menu while others hate it. You're going to have people on both sides of the spectrum. I don't see any reason why between now and later on there won't be a major update to fix the few issues that it has. The only real issue that I have with it would be the frame rate. I don't want to play these games and have such big frame rate skips to where it's noticeable. I like the games to be nice and smooth. The wireless controllers aren't that big of a deal. I'm an originalist. I'll play the game with the original Sega Genesis controller or the arcade stick. If you've never played a Sega Genesis game with an arcade stick, it's absolutely incredible. Like a game like Streets of Rage, absolutely fun as can be. So that's most likely what I'm going to do. The wireless controller issue is not that big of a deal. So if this console doesn't appeal to you, they're also going to have the portable unit for $59.99. It'll have an SD card slot, which is pretty cool. You'll be able to play games from your computer that you've downloaded on it and put it on your system, which is really nice. A lot of Sega Genesis games look really good when they're condensed. If you've ever had a Sega Nomad, you'll know what I'm talking about. Plus, for anyone who doesn't have a big Sega Genesis collection, the ability to put a ROM on the card and play it on the go might be appealing to you. So what are your thoughts on this new system coming out? Do you think it's going to be able to compete with Nintendo Super Nintendo Classic coming out, or do you think it's going to fail right out of the gate? Personally, I don't think it's going to be able to compete with Nintendo. It's hard to compete with such a big dog like that with such a huge fan base, including me. But I don't think this thing's going to fail. I think they'll have a big update between here and when it's released, or even one after, that fixes the few issues that it has. I'm really eager to get my hands on one of these things. I think the box art looks incredible. I love the way it's modeled after the Model 1, and I'm pretty excited to see how it compares to the Retron 5. Plus, will this thing have any latency issues just like the NES Classic Edition? We're going to find out. Alright guys, that's it. That's all I got to talk about for this one. I think I'm going to start doing more discussion videos like this when it pertains to topics that we as gamers love. I think I owe it to you subscribers out there. I'm starting to develop quite a few of you, and I think it would be cool to give y'all some of the news that y'all may not catch on a regular basis. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.